Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great commentary. So I've been asked for a long time, not just in comments from my viewers, but even IRL, like how does like a white middle-class Jewish guy from, a secular liberal family, in America become, a right-wing extremist? I don't know. I think I think most people are pretty malleable and they're pretty influenced by their surroundings when it comes to how they end up politically. But some people are just like they're going to be how they're going to be. And it doesn't really matter what their background is. And I think I'm one of those. I think I was always destined to end up as a right-wing extremist. But a lot of it isn't going to be anything about my background. It's going to be, that's just the way I'm wired. But, so let's talk a little bit about my upbringing. It's true that my family is liberal. However, it wouldn't be correct to say that I come from a liberal family. Growing up, I lived in a neighborhood in an area where there were very few Democrats. It was, we're talking in this place like the late 80s, okay? The mid-ish late 80s. And my parents were like pretty much the only Democrats they knew, like in our neighborhood, in our area. It was an overwhelmingly Republican town. My parents were, I don't remember them talking about Reagan. I know that they told me that they didn't like him. I do remember them, how much they disliked George Bush Sr. And I remember when Michael Dukakis was running against George Bush in 1988. That's the first election I remember. And I remember my dad, like my mom wasn't really as into politics, but my dad was a super Mike Dukakis guy, and he really liked him a lot. But then George Bush Sr. won that election pretty big. But I was so young, I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew that I wanted Dukakis to win because that's who my dad wanted to. So I just assumed that that was the right guy for us. And then politics, then, but I was older for the next election, which was the 1992 election between Bill Clinton and George Bush Sr. again. Now, in between that, I do remember there was this time where my dad, and I guess most of the country, really did love George Bush Sr. for like a few days during the Gulf War. And I also remember one time, a neighborhood girl was, I don't know if we were going to get ice cream or something or what, but I was in the car with my dad, I think my mom, myself, a neighborhood girl, my brother, and I'm not sure if anybody else. And this girl was, she was like a year older than me, and she started saying something mocking about George Bush Sr. It was just like silly kid stuff. And she said something, and I was laughing at it, and we were both laughing. And my dad was like, don't talk about the president that way. And I was like, well, why not? You don't like him. And he said, you're right, I don't like him, but he's still the president, so I still respect him. I think that gives you an idea of how different a time the early 90s were. That's not a kind of statement you'd hear today. But anyway, he goes to run against Bill Clinton, and my dad was a big Bill Clinton fan. He was, I didn't know all this at the time, but apparently Bill Clinton was the one who was more of the, he was what was called a new Democrat, because the Democrats were seen then as like being like too socialistic, the party of like the welfare moochers, and soft on crime and just really bad. So Bill Clinton is this guy who's like, no, I'm a Democrat, but I'm like a hard ass. Like I'm really like, I'm against any like anti-white discrimination, and I'm against like I want abortion to be legal, but I want it to be rare, and like I'm a Democrat, but I'm not a liberal, or I'm not too liberal. And I know that my parents, I didn't know all this at the time. I know my parents were really taken with this and really enthusiastic about Bill Clinton, and they voted for him. But then things started to change. Again, like I wasn't politically engaged. I was just absorbing what my parents, talked about and did stuff. Bill, it started with my dad. My dad began to dislike and then eventually develop a truly murderous hatred for Bill Clinton. I mean, like, it was unreal how much my dad hated this guy. And, then he got, after being liberal his whole life, he got more and more into conservative stuff. So he started reading this magazine, this neoconservative magazine called The Weekly Standard, and this more traditional but somewhat neoconish magazine called The National Review. Pretty much all conservatives back then were kind of neoconservatives. When I say neo, I don't know if you guys know what neocons are, but it was a bigger phrase like 20 years ago. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. Like it's so overused, it doesn't mean anything. But it was basically people who had been liberals in the 60s or 70s and then became disillusioned with the Democratic Party and the left. So in a lot of ways, they were still really liberal, but they also tended to really believe in spreading democracy and a sort of American imperialism. And I guess, my dad had bought into that. He bought into an increasing amount of conservative stuff. My mom, not really, but she did dislike Clinton and thought he was trash. And they both voted against him in the 96 election against Bob Dole. They voted for Bob Dole, I mean. And, but like my dad hated Clinton. Like he would go off on these like screaming rampages about how much he hated Bill Clinton and Al Gore. And my dad had some serious anger issues yeah, so he really hated it. And I would say that because like this was all kind of happening like at the same time my dad's hating Clinton, this is like where I'm starting to hate my dad. So, but despite all that, I was still very influenced by my dad. Like I hated my dad and I thought he was an idiot, but I kind of was like, well, I kind of agree with him like on the Clinton stuff. But then came the Clinton impeachment, which is the first time in my life I really paid attention to politics. And it was frustrating because like things in my town had changed. All of a sudden it was like it was more, people were more, like the town had become much more liberal and democratic. And during the Clinton impeachment, my dad obviously was like a diehard, we have to impeach Clinton guy. And I was, influenced by that. And, so I I would hear the kids in school, in class conversations about it, being all against the impeachment and being against Clinton being impeached. And by the way, for the record, today in hindsight, I don't think Clinton should have been impeached. But that's at the time it was a different story. They were saying stuff, but I could tell it was like, you guys are just echoing what you hear from your parents. And I knew that I was kind of doing the same thing, but logically it made sense because they would say stuff. I don't know if they were being dishonest or they just didn't get it or what, because people were saying like, well, you can't impeach the guy over a blowjob. And even back in the 90s, I would have agreed with that. It's like people weren't saying that. We're saying that the guy lied under oath and then obstructed justice. Like that's the entire U.S. criminal justice system is based on. So, yeah, I think, so that was the logic I was in there. And if they would just had addressed that and said, well, I don't think that's sufficient for him to be impeached, okay, I'd have been fine. But but I got so angry because they kept saying like, well, you're just trying to like impeach him for a blowjob or something like that. No, no. Although again, when you consider the power dynamic there between him and an intern that's like what 30 plus years younger, and the disgrace to the office, I mean, those are factors too. Again, look, I think it was a mistake. I wouldn't have impeached him. I think it was a mistake. I don't think Nixon should have been impeached. But at this time, that thing with Clinton was happening, the idea of that impeaching Nixon, Watergate, was like a political consensus because it was just such a different time. But what happened to Nixon was bullshit, and Clinton shouldn't have been impeached either. But that's just like how debates get all fucked up like that shit. So anyway, then the political situation calmed down after that. Then George Bush Jr. beats Al Gore in 2000. Yeah, look, I wanted Bush just because I was heavily influenced by my parents' politics, and they had kind of gone over to the right. Not kind of, they had gone over to at least the Republican right. I do remember my dad being a George W. Bush skeptic. He hated the whole like compassionate conservative thing. He was like, well, that's just, so you're not a real conservative then. Because at this time, my dad was no longer defined himself as a liberal. My mom, like, he was just a diehard conservative, getting increasingly into the pro-life stuff and the pro-gun stuff, although he never owned a gun. And so he thought Bush was basically just a mushy wimp. He didn't like him, but he kind of grew to like Bush. But during the Bush-McCain primary is when you saw that my dad really didn't like McCain. He really disliked McCain a lot. And and then I'll skip ahead a little bit here because like my dad's been gone for a long time. But I remember during Trump's first term, my dad, my brother, and my uncle. My brother is like a Black Lives Matter SJW type, and my uncle's probably not. He's just as partisan and tribal as my brother, even more so. Probably not quite as extreme, at least in a lot of ways, than my brother. But they're like the two furthest left people in my family. And my uncle was talking to my brother about yeah, I wonder how Phil, my dad, I wonder how, Phil would feel about Trump, if he were still here. And my brother was saying like, yeah, I'd like to believe that he'd be one of the Republicans who'd be like, oh, I wish we still had guys like John McCain. And it like pissed me off so much that he would say that. It's like, Dad hated John McCain when he was still alive, before anybody even thought about Trump. So like, no, I don't think my dad would have been a big Trump guy. I think he would have thought Trump was a jackass. And I don't think he would have supported him in the primaries in 2016. But after Trump won the nomination, he would have been a diehard Trump guy all the way. It's just like you'd have to be in such denial to say anything else. But whatever. Getting off of that. So anyway, Bush wins the election, which was kind of a weird election because it became unclear, like in Florida, whether it was legit or not. It was very unusual. Like Gore won the popular vote, and but Bush kind of won by like a technicality in Florida. It was really weird, and you have the left who doesn't really handle, like nobody handles losing well in American politics, which are winner take all, but the left was frustrated. It was kind of like, how they felt after the Trump thing. It wasn't apocalyptic, but when like Trump came in, they felt like, yeah, they lost, but they lost on a technicality. They really won. And then that was how they felt like with Bush, that he wasn't a legitimate president. And whatever. I mean, I wasn't really interested in politics. I wasn't paying attention to him. I saw Bush talk on TV a few times, and I thought he was impressive. But then came 9/11. And that was my political awakening. When 9/11 happened, I mean, at first what happened, I was just scared. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know if this was going to be like World War III and Armageddon. like a lot of guys were even talking like about, are we going to get drafted? And you know, I was a senior in high school, so and then, you know, what took over was like a feeling of just rage. Like I was just in just absolute fury, and I wanted blood. And you know, like I said, right, like I'm Jewish, but I wasn't really raised Jewish. Like we celebrated Christmas and Easter, and then we didn't, the only Jewish holiday we celebrated was Hanukkah, but we did that in kind of a half-assed way. So we never did it. Like we tried to do Rosh Hashanah once and it didn't work. I can't even remember whether it was Rosh Hashanah or Passover. And so the thing is, like, and then, so the only real thing I knew about Judaism was from going to like bar mitzvahs of kids in my school. And there's, if you've ever been to one, you'll hear the prayers in it, and they'll say like you see, like the only word I recognize is Israel, 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 Israel. And I actually thought they were talking about the state of Israel. I I wasn't really into the religion anyway, but I was like, this is just a joke. Like you're praying, talking about like a country. That's crazy. And but the reason I'm bringing this all up, because when it happened, I was like, we need to do is just nuke the entire Middle East because of what they did to us, and then we need to nuke Israel too because they got us into this mess. That was how I felt in the aftermath. There was actually the next day in school, there was like, oh God, I don't know. Well, what happened the next day in school was there was, I had this class where some people in my school were right wing, some people were more left wing, whatever. It was very mixed. It was a very mixed area. So this particular class, though, was, even though it was a high school elective called Minority Studies. So, except for me, most people in the class were extremely liberal. I'd gone into it basically non-political and then had quickly radicalized in the aftermath of 9/11. So we were talking about the attack and the day after, like a class discussion. And I was saying, we need to nuke like the entire Middle East and kill all of them. And and then my teacher was like, well, that sounds like you're advocating genocide. And I said, yes, I am. In this case, we need to go forward with genocide. And again, you know, remember, it's like liberals, very sensitive. So like, I think like during this course of the thing, I basically got in a shouting match with everybody in the class. Like, one girl ran out of the room crying, and another girl went and followed her. I feel like another one came after that. My teacher got so frustrated that he said, I got to step out. And he stepped out and walked out of the room. And so, but anyway, like, you know, like I was just like, okay, yeah, that was funny, but whatever. But then like, you know, like a week later, right, my mom comes home from the parent teacher night, you know, and she was like, yeah, you know, that class you have, Minority Studies, there was this thing that like all the parents in the class were saying that there was this one boy in it who had said something that had really upset their kid and like traumatized their kid, and that they had to confront it. And then it's like, my mom was like, you know, like, I don't even have to ask, right? Like, I know it's you. Oh man, those were the days. Anyway, so, but anyway, in the aftermath of 9/11, I quickly became a convert to like neoconservative politics, which was basically the thesis being that, the Muslims, the Islamists attacked us because they hate our freedoms. Maybe not something quite that corny, but in so many words that. And what we need to do is conquer their countries and then make democracies there, like we did to Germany and Japan in World War II. And I did this less for ideological reasons than I just thought that's what we needed to be safe, because I didn't know, like, what happens if is the next attack going to be with gas or anthrax or something like that. Really, I just overestimated how much of a danger terrorism was. I got caught up in all that shit. But then, but the whole thing brought focus onto, like, the conflict in the Middle East. What I mean is the Israel-Palestine stuff. So for the first time, I started researching it. And also for the first time, like, it's not as bad as it was today, but that was in the days of, like, the first Intifada. I mean, I'm sorry, the second Intifada. I don't remember the first Intifada. And not really in America. You didn't really see it in America like you do today. But in Europe, you definitely, there was, like, a huge upsurge in anti-Semitism, which you hadn't really seen, like, since World War II ended, at least not in Western Europe. And then all of a sudden, like, it seems like it comes out of nowhere, right? Because of this, the Intifada, but then also 9/11. And that was the first time, that was how I started, like, again, because I didn't get it from my parents, started, like, really researching, like, Israel and the Middle East and getting into Israeli politics. Now, initially, when I was going to make this video, I was going to talk about both, since they're both a big part of my political journey. But I think that if I'm going to talk about Zionism and me, it's going to have to be a whole separate video. So I would rather just focus this one on American politics. I will say, though, that, so after 9/11, yeah, I got into neoconservatism at first, but it got to, I very quickly got more and more into Israeli politics, and more, certainly by the time I left high school, I didn't even really consider myself American anymore. I just considered myself Jewish. And which isn't how I felt at all growing up. Because, I've had people ask me, people say, like, well, how can you describe yourself as white when you're Jewish? Well, I describe myself as white, but I don't, when I say it, I don't mean it as a ethnic signifier. Like, obviously, I get that I'm not of European descent. But that's not really what white meant when I was growing up. Like, honestly, like, when I was growing up, white, it largely meant just not black. I mean, like, yeah, okay, Asians aren't really white either. But as long as you, like, politically and culturally, Jews were, maybe it's different now. When I was a kid, politically and culturally, Jews were just considered another white ethnic group, which is what I always thought. Honestly, I'm going to be serious with you. I didn't even know Jews were an ethnicity when I was growing up. I really thought that we were the same as everybody else. We just had a different religion. That, like, when my I seriously thought, right, that my ancestors from Poland were just Poles who converted to Judaism. I had no idea about any of that other stuff. So that's why, I've always considered myself white, and I still do. But I mean it, again, as a political signifier, not an ethnic one. So, but like I said, I want to focus this on American politics. However, it is important to say that, there were a lot of years there where I wasn't really focused on American politics. I was, like, from 2002 through 2008. You probably that I was mainly focused on Israeli politics. Yeah, look, I paid attention to American politics. I voted for Bush in 2004, which, I obviously I regret. But I wasn't really paying attention to American politics. And then, like, things happened during that time where I was more interested in Israeli politics. Things happened in that 2002 through really 2006 time span. Things happened that caused me to become extremely alienated from the state of Israel. I'm talking about political things within Israel itself. And So for like a while, I wasn't really paying attention to any politics. But then, and then, like Obama comes on the scene, and there's like, it's like a change of pace, and there's the thing with McCain, and I was always been really interested in libertarian type economics, and not that McCain was a libertarian, but the Republicans at least talked a more, libertarian economic game than the Democrats did. I was really concerned about the growing national debt, and not really the debt, more the structural deficit. The fact that like we had it, like the United States had entitlement spending that it wasn't going to be able to meet. So I just like, was into, so basically like fiscal conservatism. I wasn't like, at this stage, I was pretty disillusioned, like most people, with the war stuff, like the Iraq had turned into a quagmire. Although by the time of the election, it was getting better. And I was kind of thinking like, well, let's see it out. Like, we're getting ready to leave anyway. Let's, finish the war over there and see it out. So I voted for McCain. I really regret it. And even when Obama won, I remember this feeling of relief. And I know I'm not the only McCain voter who felt that way. Like, it was just time for a change. We needed to change it. But in the aftermath of Obama's victory, the country kind of like, there was like a political mindset change, right? As late as 2007, when, I mean, seriously, you guys wouldn't get what the Democrats were like before Obama. It was so different. And like even Obama in 2008 said that he was against gay marriage. I remember in 2006, one of the things that the Democrats ran on in the midterms was building a fence on the border and stopping illegal immigration. I remember there was this time in the early aughts where the Ninth Circuit crazies did something about how, like, you can't sing the Star-Spangled Banner or something. And a bunch of Democrats and Republicans were out on the steps of Congress, like, singing it for a photo op, when Hillary was running against Obama, there was actually, like, a time where I think she said something like, well, yeah, he's got to learn how to appeal to hardworking white people. Like she wasn't even dog whistling. She was just doing it like explicitly, playing on white identity politics. Different world, right? And then Obama wins. And yeah, I was relieved, but the reaction to it, like, was the left of just saying, like, there was all this stuff saying, like, oh, the time of the white male is done and shit like that. We're all like, and especially because there was that financial crisis and things. So it's time for like a whole brave new world of women and minorities and young people taking over. And look, probably not a big deal, right? But if you guys have watched any of my stuff, you know that I am somebody who is obsessed with what other people think. I don't care what people think about me, but I care that if they believe in something that I'm against, like, it pisses me off. And then if they think they're winning or they have won, it doesn't just piss me off, it drives me insane. I go out of my mind. And, when you add that to, in college, I got really into anti-feminism. Why? I'm not even sure. I mean, it's like, I really don't know what it was all about. I mean, I still don't like feminism. I just don't get why I cared so much. But all of that came together, like, with the Obama stuff. Because, like, a lot of the far left people I would read, would be big time feminists, and like, I just couldn't fucking stand it. Like, I had an especially deep hatred for liberal white women who would, on one hand, they go and bash white people, but on the same time, they consider themselves like a minority themselves. And I remember this site, I don't know if it still exists, called Feministing. And one of the girls there was complaining, like, that a white cis male had gotten this job that she was looking for. It was like, well, it should have been a person of color, a gay person, or a woman. Like like women are minor, like some oppressed group too. I was like, get the fuck out of here, you spoiled bitch. Look, it's not none of that shit was worth getting mad about, but it bothered me, you know. And you can't act like there wasn't that cultural zeitgeist in those years if you remember them, or if you were around for them, or if you remember them. This idea that white males are yesterday's news. We don't need them anymore. You know, it was always bullshit, but still, and then it really went into overdrive when Obama beat Romney, and that was again, yes, and then I voted for Romney, like the cuck that I am. But here's the thing, right? I had never thought about it. There was a big immigration fight during the end of George W. Bush's second term. And I had no dog in the fight. I didn't care. I was way more focused on Israeli politics. I didn't even really get what people were arguing about. Like, if you'd asked me, I would have said, yeah, I guess I'm against it, but I don't care. I mean, like, I didn't know any Latinos. I didn't care about it. I didn't care about immigration, whatever. Then the thing failed. Oh, by the way, when that bill failed, several Democrats voted against it. It would have passed if every Democrat had voted for it. That's how, again, what I'm saying is how different the Democratic Party used to be. Yeah, so that part, like, but it was when it was actually reading about, like, when McCain was running, when I started to realize that, like, oh, it got into me, like, oh shit, this mass immigration is affecting American elections now, because the Democrats are just importing millions of new voters. And they're going to outvote us. And it also got into me, like, I grew up in a world, again, if you weren't there, you don't know what it's like. My older viewers will understand this. Where it was just, like, assumed that America was white and always would be. So if you said something against immigration in the 90s, like, people didn't think of it as, and I know because people didn't think of it as in, like, oh, you're trying to prevent a demographic transformation of the country. People interpreted it as, what, you got a problem with non-white people? Because it just seemed like, well, America's always going to be 80% white no matter what. That's seriously what we thought. And you see that, especially after Obama, even before Obama, but really with Obama, you start to see, and then the left getting open about it, saying, like, we're replacing you. You know, they're like, again, that's why I always say, great replacement is not a theory, it's not a conspiracy, and it's not a theory. And, you know, because it's not a theory because it's happening, and it's not a conspiracy because it was never hidden. They've always been open about it. You know, I guess you could say it was conspiracy before 2008, but since then they've been very open about it. I mean, they threw it in your face. Maybe they don't anymore, but they threw it in your face. So what this did is my politics became increasingly racialized. So I started reading stuff like VDare, Steve Saylor, and I started to, because that's the only places where you could go to see like anti-immigrant stuff. That's the only people who were calling this shit out. So yeah, I bought into a lot of the stuff, and, you know, I started to see this, like, American politics is actually just like a racial conflict by proxy. And, like, to the point, like, you know, it just goes to show, like, when you spend a lot of time online, how much it can warp your mind. Because, so we've been like 2010, right? When the Republicans, like, had a landslide victory in the House. And I was at my friend's house. We were all hanging out watching TV. And I don't know if there were 4 of us. I think 5 of us, right? And there's this one Asian, and then me, and then three other white guys. And this one guy who's there says something about John Boehner, the new Republican, the new Speaker of the House. Like, very negative, saying, like, this guy sucks, or whatever. And this is just like some normal middle-class white kid. And, like, immediately and instinctively I say, like, Do you have some kind of problem with white people or something? Because that was how warped my mind had gotten. Like that, like everything was racial. Everything, it was all this like big racial conflict, whites versus non-whites. And the particularly, now, like I said, one of the guys there was Asian. So I didn't really see it as so much as with Asian. There was even a phrase that they would, I don't know if they still use it, called NAMs, which means non-Asian minorities. And, but I mean, the thing is, I bought into what the left was saying, that there was like some unified black and brown front against white people. I'm serious. This is all shit I believed. And, you know, yeah, so that's like, so like that made politics extremely apocalyptic because the demographics of the country were changing. And I was like, well, what we need to do is find a way to, like, I never thought we were going to like mass deport non-whites or something, but I was like, well, we need to like change the demographics. So what we need to do is like stop all immigration, stop all non-white immigration, and then bring in like 50 million whites from wherever we can get them, like from Europe or Russia or whatever. And now I wasn't like a super spurg about it, like some people. I didn't really care about the racial purity thing. I was more interested in it from a like a demographic thing. Like, the thing is, like, you know, you like, because like if somebody's half white and half Latino, they're just going to consider themselves white. You know, I just wanted people to, I kind of like a prison gang, you know, thing is where it doesn't, it's more about like who you hang with, what you look like, you know, and, you know, like they would even say that like on the message boards back then, they would say, our problem with Hispanic immigrants is that they don't look like us. That's why and that was it. I was like, yeah, it's us or them. It wasn't like, you know, I had become, I just didn't want whites to lose their majority status. I wanted the country to be like I grew up in, like 70 to 80% white. And the fact that it looked like it was going to become majority non-white, and again, remember, I thought that there was going to be a brown-black coalition against whites, bothered me a lot. And no, look, I don't buy into any of that shit anymore. But that was how I felt. And that would be how I felt for a while. There was also this thing around the same time. There was this TV show on Showtime called Brotherhood. And there's this, like, about this, like, corrupt Irish-American Politico in Providence, Rhode Island. And so he's like in this old Irish-American neighborhood. But one thing in the background in the show is that the Irish are kind of dying out and like moving on to other places. And meanwhile, it's new immigrants from Latin America that are coming in and seeing them replace it. And just seeing like, it just made me feel like we really are being replaced. Like, I mean, it was just a TV show, but it was a real phenomenon. And, you know, I just had an extreme paranoia about it. You know, and a lot of it was, some of it was from the stuff I was reading, but a lot of it was a reaction to the stuff from the left, which, again, you guys might not remember it, but around this time on the left was like really gung-ho, not just about immigration, but in particularly about how Hispanic immigration was going to give them like this permanent majority dystopia. And well, another thing is that they would always say this word, the ascending coalition. This is what the left would use. They don't say it anymore. Which is blacks, Latinos, Asians, college-educated whites, and then young voters, and you know, whatever that means, and of all colors. This was going to give them, they called it the ascending coalition. I know I already said that. That was going to give them their permanent majority. Triggered the fuck out of me. So the but also I started reading this thing Zero Hedge because I was interested in economics, because I had really, the economic crisis had caused me to lose a lot of faith in capitalism, at least for a while. And for the first time, I started to develop an interest in monetary policy, which I never understood before, because I had read libertarian stuff, but like when they talked about like ending the Fed or fiat currency, I just had no idea what they were on about. And I just always figured like, well, that stuff's not really important. And then it was after the crisis, the financial crisis, that I started to really understand that stuff and just see just how important that stuff is. To the point where, as I see it, as the core of a lot of our problems we have today, not just economic, but political. So I was really, like, I was never an anti-immigrant activist. I was never into doing any activism, per se. I was a silent participant. Like, I had my moral support. My only activism was posting on message boards. And I didn't even bother calling my reps or anything like that. And voting, I guess. Voting. So, I mean, I voted enthusiastically for the Republicans in 2010, voted for them again in 2012. Romney lost, but I did feel like Romney wasn't like enthusiastic about anti-immigration, but he was more anti-immigrant than Obama. And I thought, I didn't realize quite how pro-immigrant he was. I thought he was more immigrant than he had came off. Then came, like, after Romney's lost, there was this time of soul searching where the Republicans were trying to become pro-immigrant. And look, I didn't call anybody. I didn't participate in getting the bill killed, because it looked like immigration reform was going to pass. This immigration reform, not only were they going to illegal the 30 million illegals who are already here, they were going to legalize all of them. Which, by the way, opens up to unlimited chain migration. But then they were going to increase the legal immigration from like 1.5 million a year to 3 million a year. This bill was a monstrosity. So you look, I should have called. I don't like calling people. Okay, I didn't want to call my rep. I should have called my rep at least once. I didn't. I thought it was going to pass. It looked like it was going to pass, and it's really kind of a miracle that it didn't. It has to do with internal Republican stuff, particularly Eric Cantor getting knocked off in his. From what I heard, it was supposed to go ahead, and then Eric Cantor lost his primary. And so we killed immigration reform. That was great, and I really had this feeling of relief, because I thought, I don't think they're going to be able to do it again. I think that like the party is, because I really felt like anti-immigration forces were really taking over the party. And then Trump comes along, and the rest is history. You know, when Trump came on the scene, there was still like an alt-right thing, because before Trump, everybody who was anti-immigrant was like grouped in the same thing, you know, like, so like, you know, pre-Trump, and this is like, you want to know why people like Nick Fuentes are so hostile to Trump. It's because before Trump, the whole right was like together, right? So like what I mean by that is like everybody who was anti-immigrant was in the same thing. So there's people who are like really anti-Israel or anti-Jewish, and then I don't know how serious they are about the anti-black stuff. I assume that nobody can really believe that shit, because that's the thing, right? I don't agree with anti-Semitism, but you can be an intelligent anti-Semite. No intelligent person could believe the shit that they say about blacks, like so, or the stuff they say about gays, and or the stuff they say about women. Well, that's not true. Some intelligent, probably not to the extent that they do. So, like, I know some people are going to say, "Oh no, they really believe that stuff." I don't think so. I think that they're just. I don't think they're crazy about any of those groups, but I think it's just like a trolling image thing. I think they take the anti-Semitism stuff seriously, though. But the point is, whatever you think about it, all of that was together, right? And I'll give you an example. On the old Roisey message board, you guys probably don't remember it. It was like a pickup artist message board. But there was this, during Trump's first election, right? There was this time where some crazy black dude in like South Carolina, I think, goes and shoots this young white female reporter like on live TV, It was horrific. It was a terrible thing. But I mean, the guy did it because the dude was out of his mind. He was nuts. The guy thought cats were persecuting him. And by this time, because I'll be honest with you, like I bought into a lot of the anti-black stuff for a while. By this time, I had already was already dismissive of it, because I had become so obsessed with immigration that I was just focused on, you know, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I was racist against Latinos. I'm not anymore. I'm not proud of it. I'm not endorsing it. So don't take me down, YouTube. I'm just telling you that I was. I really was. And but anyway, but it was, I remember, so on Royce's board, they were saying, like, there was a guy saying, like, showing the picture, right, of the girl, like, screaming, and you can see the gun. You can't see the guy, but you can see the gun. And he, like, and one guy was saying, like, Trump should just release this as an ad, and, you know, he'll win the election that way. And, you know, the reason I'm bringing this up is because the entire dissident right, you know, really felt like, you know, basically everybody on the right thought their issue was getting resolved. So, like, people who were, like, really anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, they just assumed Trump would be with them. People who were really anti-black just assumed that Trump would be with them. And look, me too. Like, I was really into the anti-Latino stuff, and I assumed that Trump was with me. And I see that he's really not. He's really not anti. I mean, I don't like to get in arguments about, like, whether somebody's racist or not, but he's anti-immigration, but he's won over a lot of, you know, Hispanic votes. And so, yeah, right. So, but the thing is, like, but so yeah. So what you've had, again, I'm gonna try to end this here quickly. This part of it, though. Like, one thing that makes guys like Nick Fuentes and stuff so frustrated is that, you know, he's basically, like, if you're trying to sell, right, to, like, sell the anti-Semitic stuff, but to a lesser extent the anti-black or the anti-woman stuff. Well, before Trump, you could use the anti-immigrant stuff to sell that, and now you can't, because the guy in power is anti-immigrant. And, you know, so if you wanted to, like, do the anti-Israel stuff, to a lot, like, there's not as much of an audience. And this is very common with extremist political movements all over the world. Like, you'll see this, like, left-wing movements in Latin America, communist movements in Latin America would actually kill people who went out to help the poor, like kill organizations that were helping the poor, because they didn't want the poor's plight improved. They wanted because they wanted them to go to communism, you know? And it's the same type of thing there. But that's a little off topic. But the thing is, so Trump gets elected, and I really thought, I was like, okay, the liberals who are freaking out, they're scared. But once they realize that we're not going after them, that we're just going after these immigrants, they will mellow out, and the country will be calmed down, and things will go back to the way they were in the 90s, which shows you how naive I was. So over the course of that term, like, seeing the left freak out, that's when a real transition happened, that I no longer saw immigrants as the enemy. I'm still anti-immigration, but it was no longer my first priority. I said immigrants are the symptom, not the disease. The disease is white liberals. And that's, you know, so I became like, so inside my murderous hatred, which had been reserved for immigrants, just seamlessly shifted over to white liberals. And I actually kind of felt like it was like the scales had lifted from my eyes. Like, I've been led amok. The whole, I thought the enemy was the immigrants. The real enemy is white liberals. And those feelings got even more extreme during COVID. And then during the election, the COVID election, which at the time I thought was stolen. Now I think legally it wasn't stolen, but I don't know. No, it was a weird election, and I don't blame myself for thinking it was stolen. I didn't trust anything that the media says, and I still don't. And they have given me no reason to not distrust them with their behavior over the last decade plus. But yeah, no, I started to see Yeah, white liberals as the main enemy. And, I used to talk about the, like on here on this channel, about the Ukraine war, and I would be like, I don't really care about Trump anymore because I don't need him, because if Russia's going to knock over Ukraine and China's going to knock over Taiwan, and look, I didn't support either of those things. I've always said I felt conflicted about it. I always said that I thought that what Russia was doing to Ukraine was wrong, and that I opposed it. But it's like I've said a million times, and I stand by this, by the way, that those of us in the West, right? Those of us in the West who are against liberalism, who are against Western liberalism, which I certainly am. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea are no threat to us whatsoever. They just aren't. They're just not a threat to us. And they are a huge threat, however, to the people who are persecuting us. And that's still the way I feel. So and I really felt like, obviously I was, again, because I don't trust the media. I knew that Russia wasn't doing as bad as the media said, so I thought Russia was actually winning, and they're making some progress, I guess. But I don't. At this stage, I can't tell what the hell's going on. And I was really into it, really into the Russia thing, and I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong to root for Russia, but I couldn't help it because I just hate liberals so much. I hated liberals so much. And then came October 7th, and I'll talk a little bit about it again here. I was, at first just numb and shocked, and then, because I hadn't been paying attention to Israeli politics. I had thought that I was could just be done with Israeli politics, just leave it on the back burner and not pay attention anymore. And I was just devastated for months. And then time healed some of it. Another thing that really helped for me was some of the atrocity stories that came out about October 7th turned out not to have happened. There was one that I knew was bullshit the first time I heard it, the one about the babies getting beheaded, because I know the Palestinians pretty well, and that's just not something they would do. And another thing is, even if it were true, I wouldn't really, yes, that would have been horrible. But if you're going to kill babies, does it really matter how you do it? In fact, beheading them is probably the most humane way to do it. So I just didn't, it was it would be bad, but it didn't care. But then there was this other story about, at least one story of a kid being stuck alive in an oven and cooked in it. But it turned out that wasn't true, which I was so relieved when I heard that. But what drove me nuts, okay, was the young women that had gotten kidnapped. And it just drove me crazy. I just couldn't be at peace until we got them back. Us Jews got them back. I just want I just want our girls back. You can kill all the other ones, just give them the girls back. And they're look, I'm not saying I didn't care about the other hostages. Even now, there's still 10, 9, I don't know how many hostages there. I would switch places with them in a heartbeat. But I'm not going to lie about the way I felt. Okay, I needed to get those girls back, for to have any kind of fullish recovery. Yeah. So, but look, it fucked me up for a while. I thought for a while that I was just never going to be able to do politics again, because my heart just wasn't in it anymore. And but a few months I started to get back into it. I did end up voting for Trump, although, again, without much enthusiasm. But that's the thing, right? Because I used to obsessively hate white liberals. I would go and hate read white liberal stuff every day. That all ended after October 7th. And to this day, do I still hate read liberals sometimes? Yes. But not obsessively, not every day. It's not it was the focus of my life. Now it's not even a focus. So, and I really have changed in that sense. But I still believe in all the same stuff. Like, I'm still anti-immigrant. I'm still anti-liberal. You know, I'm still anti-deep state. I know that's kind of a cliche, but, you know, federal bureaucracy and stuff like that. Don't like the tariffs, and I may talk about that later. But, yeah, yeah, so, yep, that's it. That's all for now. See you in the next.